Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti with Resiliency Matters, and today we're speaking with Mike Schlitz, who served as a U.S. Army Ranger and is a recipient of the Purple Heart. He has much to teach us about world making after loss. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Molly. Wonderful to see you again, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you. So let's go back to 2007, the day that you were severely injured while serving. What would you like to share about that day?
Yeah, that day started out like any other day. I mean, combat's combat. You run your patrols day in, day out. We started, got everybody in, gave the mission briefing, did our rehearsals. Um, so really nothing out of the ordinary. And, we were kicking out on a road clearing mission that was supposed to take about 15 hours. And, we were a couple hours into it right as the sun was starting to break for the day or come up for the day. And, before we know it, it turned really bad really quick.
And you were injured. You sustained some injuries. So what did that look like?
So we were hit. My vehicle, which was the trail vehicle, was hit with deep buried IED, and it was 2 artillery shells in a propane tank. And so what I've gathered between what I remember when it happened to what I've also learned, post injury, is it basically came up through the vehicle and it threw me from the vehicle. So, the first part of that's my perception of everything that went on. And I mean, I remember hearing the boom before I could even spit out a choice 4-letter word. I was already hitting the ground, and I knew we'd been attacked. I knew in my head that we had just what we call an ambush, surprise attack. And in training, they always say just take that split second to get a battle damage assessment. What happened? Where did it come from? And what can you do? And so for me, I saw my vehicle. I didn't see my guys. So I just initially just got up and ran for my vehicle. And before I could get to the vehicle, I could feel the flames hitting me in the face. And, from there, I dropped my body armor to get as much of it off me as possible. And then, just like they teach you in kindergarten, drop and roll. What I didn't know is there was propane attached, as part of the IED. And so every time I'd roll, it just reignite because it was on my uniform. And basically my muscles locked up, and then I was just face down in the dirt. And, I was ready to, in my mind, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die here in Iraq, face down in the dirt. And as that was happening, I could start to hear my guys yell for me that was in the vehicle ahead of us. And it didn't give me much hope because I didn't think there was much they could do for me. And before I knew it, they hit me with that fire extinguisher. And I tell everybody 2 things kind of came over my body at that precise moment. First was the physical release, like it felt like somebody had put an ice blanket on me, and it immediately kind of took the pain away. And then the second part was like, all right, my guys are here. They're taking care of me. Now I got a fighting chance. And then just training, we do this so much that I just jumped into action. I started, okay, hey, let's get security up. Let's get the HLV set up. Let's make sure we're sending reports up to higher. And I just went right back and doing my job, even though I was on the ground. And the truth is my guys, in the brief knew the succession of command. They were already doing all those things. So even if I wouldn't have said a word, everything that needed to be done got done. And, they got me away from the fire. I remember the medevac coming in and picking me up. But what I didn't know at that time was I had lost everybody in my vehicle. By the reports that I've received, my gunner, Sergeant Susenka, who was up in the turret, my medic, who was in the backseat behind the driver, both died on impact. And then my driver, who was also my youngest, Corporal Henry, we know he burned alive in the vehicle.
So you lost your platoon brothers that day, and I'm thinking, the show reaches so many, and everyone can take different lessons, right? Even what you're emphasizing with training and the importance of doing that and how it kicks in and can save lives. But thinking of your platoon brothers, I think there's a lot of survivor's guilt going on. I recently talked to someone who's had more than 24 neighbors lose their homes, and her home is standing. So did you experience survivor's guilt, and if so, how did you find peace in that?
Initially, I would say that I dealt with survivor's guilt at the very beginning of my recovery, um, but I refused that kind of mindset. Um, so I'd probably say it didn't take me long, but I kind of coined a phrase. I have survivor's pride.
Mm,
Um, I'm proud I got to serve with them. I'm proud of the men they were. I'm proud of the choices they made. I have a lot more to be proud of than face guilt. You know, I get to live my life because of the choices they made, and it's sad that they're not here with us. And this past week we celebrated our 18th anniversary of that day. Um, so they're still with me, and like I just refuse to have the guilt. I just want to make it as positive as I can, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with quite a few of their family members over the years, um, and I think that helps too.
yeah, survivor's pride. I think that will stick with our listeners and viewers for a long time. So back to you, your injuries, right? You were, I believe, burns on 85% of your body. You lost both arms. Your vision was impacted. How has your experience as a wounded warrior impacted your life perspective?
That's such a difficult question, and one I think we could probably do three segments on its own, because there's the physical aspect, there's the mental aspect. Um, physically, I'll just kind of narrow it down that, it. I've always enjoyed challenges. One of the things that drew me to the military was the challenges that we face, both as an individual, as a leader, trying to adapt and come up with new ways. And so the physical injuries I have kind of remind me that daily, like there's always some way you can figure out how to do something. But the mental one, um, that one's a little bit different, because I think it gave me a whole new perspective on life and what life really matters. Pre-injury, in the military, we always talk team, do it together, but there's a lot of individual things there too. Like if you don't do really well on your PT test, if you don't outperform your peers, you're not getting promoted, you're not going to the schools. Um, and so I think I was a little selfish pre-injury. It was a lot of like, what am I going to do for myself, or how do I attain my stuff? Um, Now I don't really have to worry about that post injury. I'm well taken care of. I have my benefits. I'm able to work. So I'm really able to focus my energy on others, and hopefully making a positive impact. And so I think it's a complete 180 from who I used to be.
A lot of growth. Talking about those mental impacts, you're very open about experiencing suicide ideation very severely initially. Um, Talk a bit about what helped see you through, or what was that experience?
Yeah, I think the suicidal ideations came early on, before prosthetics, before I could do anything. I mean, you think about everything you do from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, there's really nothing I could do. I couldn't feed myself, couldn't dress myself, couldn't take myself to the bathroom. So there were some really dark days. Luckily, I had my mother there, as my caregiver, as my support network. So I was never really left alone. I had visitors, I had friends, family, military brothers and sisters come visit. So I think having that tight knit support group really helped. Um, but deep down, even with them around, I was still in that dark place. Um, and there was multiple things along the way that kind of helped pull me out, but the biggest one I would say is the day I got my first prosthetic. um, it was very, very basic, but I got to go home with my right arm only. um, and then that night, about 16 months post injury, I finally fed myself for the first time, and I think it gave me just that little bit of hope, that little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, that things could get better. And over time, both prosthetics, getting more proficient at using them, life just kind of naturaled out, and those thoughts went away as I was able to do more.
Mm. So yeah, that independence or sense of competence played a huge role, it sounds like. And you also referenced social connection and that support. How have you seen isolation impede recovery of wounded warriors, or connection assist and facilitate recovery?
I think, from my perspective, that most time if somebody's isolating, it's not good, because they're probably forming habits that aren't healthy, whether that's drinking or even not wanting to be social. Um, but the more you sit alone, I think the more that sometimes the negative thoughts come into your head too. and that can kind of feed and feed and feed upon itself until tragedy hits, and I think the important thing is that, if you're isolating, that you go reach out. um, I always hear that the American people don't care, but that's just, there might be some people out there that it's not on their mind. But if you look at the number of VSOs that are out there helping, the programs that we have, um, the brotherhoods and sisterhoods that you had from your time in the military, no matter what branch, we have avenues to but if we don't know you need help, we can't help you.
Mm. And speaking of that brotherhood, I think the first time we met was when I attended Scott Mann's play, The Last Out, through the Gary Sinise Foundation. You were at the foundation at that time. Um, Talk a bit about that work. And I've heard you I think I've heard you say, like, no one can help a soldier like a soldier. So there's that aspect as well. And then there's all the care. I'm from a military family, but I am deep in the work. And there's so many others, right, that care. So talk a bit about that.
Well, that play was well written by Scott. I, again, had the honor of being the MC for a whole year and travel with the play and go to the different cities. Um, and it's heart wrenching. And I don't want to give it away for the people who haven't had the chance to see it, but it really harps on like taking care of each other, and that growth that we need to see. Scott Mann says, nobody's coming to save us. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we have the ability to do those things, but we have to share our stories. Veterans tend to help veterans better because we understand at some time we probably share the same dirt or the same piece of water or the same piece of sky. So it allows us to kind of relate to each other. But one of the things I will flip to that is the opposite of that. Oftentimes I also hear veterans say, I don't want to talk to them because they don't get it. But how do we bridge that gap? How do we get people to understand, or those ones that aren't helping our veterans understand? And it's very simple. You got to share your stories. How do you expect them to have a level of understanding unless you talk? And I think sometimes veterans forget about empathy. I don't have to have the same injuries. I don't have to have the same experiences to have empathy for your situation. Like if you've ever stubbed your hand, you probably at some point or hurt your hand where you couldn't use it for a little bit, you can have empathy for me not having hands. We don't have the same injury, but you can share that bond.
It's such a great point, and really did a great job of communicating what empathy is and going inward, feeling that human experience at some level and relating from that point. So great conversation. When we come back, more about what Mike is up to today and his purpose-filled work. Stay tuned.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Oh boy. Our back and forth. It always came back. Dad! You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Did you know that watching MC22 is now easier than ever before? I know, it's crazy, right? Crazy, Well, all MediaCom customers can watch local programming anytime online. Go to mc22.net, click Watch MC22, and log in with your MediaCom account. Not a MediaCom cable subscriber? That's fine. MediaCom internet or phone subscribers can watch too. Your local programming leader, MC22, online at mc22.net/watch.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We're speaking with Mike Schlitz. And Mike, we were talking about your recovery as a wounded warrior and those things that helped you get through, right? That sense of competence, that social connection. And another thing that's really coming through is that sense of purpose. I know you're with the Robert Irvine Foundation. I just saw them at Face the Fight, your representative. Talk a bit about what's going on with you and your work today.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm the associate director for military, veteran, and first responder outreach at the Robert Irvine Foundation. Anytime I get to work with the community, no matter what branch, where we're at nationwide and some overseas, I think I get more reward for what I do with reaching out and speaking with veterans than they probably get from me. Nothing to say, that is, but I just think the reward is kind of for me. But I've been very lucky for the last 15 years to work in the nonprofit space, and now with my role with Robert Irvine doing the outreach, it just gives me that ability to speak to more veterans. And whether we're doing what we call breaking bread with heroes, where we go out and we serve service members at military bases or homes across America, are Reuniting the Brave, where we help military units come back together that haven't seen each other in a while and rebuild those bonds that they once had. And then obviously one of our newer initiatives is collaborating with Face the Fight on suicide prevention.
I remember hearing you, and viewers, there are, if you search Michael Schlitz, Purple Heart, there's some little mini documentaries and some videos and on your story, and really inspiring. So I'm not sure if that's where I heard it or you told me this, but I had noted that you had said how much you loved serving, and you had planned to serve for a shorter period of time, and then you truly loved it, and you found your way to Army Ranger School. What did you love about serving in the military?
Well, just like I said earlier on, well, first, I joined the military, being a young kid out of high school, very immature, again, very selfish, just whatever it was about me, having a good time. I knew I was too immature for college. I knew if I went to college right off the get-go, I wasn't going to do well. I wasn't going to focus on it. But I didn't want just a regular, cheap job either. So I joined the military initially to get the GI Bill and hopefully grow up a little bit, get some direction, some discipline, and figure out, hey, maybe I'll know what I want to do when I'm an adult in 3 to 5 years. But my time in the military, I mean, again, going back to the challenges, that you face day in, from the day you go in the military to the day you leave. There's challenges around every corner, and I just fell in love with that. And I think there's a lot to be said about the routine, knowing where you got to be, what you got to do at a certain time. Very kind of, I think I related to the very structured atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think that when we think of military, we think of service and sacrifice. We don't often think of love, and I just want to dig a little deeper. Certainly, it sounds like you love the challenges and the personal growth. Looking at the brotherhood or the love for military families or love of country. What else comes to mind when you think about the context of those words together of love and military service?
Well, I do think you just get closer and you grow a bond that can't be kind of replaced. I know firemen and police officers and people who are in stressful, traumatic situations often feel the same way. But I stay in contact with quite a few of the people I served with, not just in combat, but throughout my career. One of my young sergeants when I was deployed in Iraq that was with me when I got injured ended up naming his son after me. So, I mean, all those things, it shows that there's a lot of love in what you would do to help each other. And not that you always agree or are going to be on the same page life-wise. It just means that you're going to be there to support them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I mentioned you are a Purple Heart recipient. You also have the Meritorious Service Award and Army Commendation Medal and Army Achievement Medal, Good Conduct, right? On and on it goes. what do you believe is one of the most important leadership traits that, let's say, for leaders in high pressure situations, which you certainly have been in, what do you think is an important leadership concept or trait that is needed?
Compassion, is what I'm going to say with that. I think as a leader, you have to know your subordinates. You have to know their weaknesses. You have to know their strengths. You have to know them as a person. And it goes further, like, if the more you know. So if you just have somebody in the army and he's not really performing, if you know he's a young guy, young, married, 2 kids at home, he's probably not making a lot of money. So if you kind of say, hey, look, let's get your PT up, let's get you studying for this school. If you go to that school, maybe we can get you promoted. Promotion means more money, and you can kind of start to gauge how you're going to motivate that individual. But that takes compassion and understanding of who that person is and what their needs are. And I think when you get to a stressful situation, staying calm, cool, and collective, and knowing that in the back of your head is going to, again, get you to make those people want to work for you and not just do it because they have to.
And again, I think you're surprising some people when you talk about those hard learned lessons from military leadership, and you are leading with that empathy, with that compassion that you've talked about. I've also heard you say, and we've had these conversations, of not to compare your injury with someone else. It's important to just acknowledge, what you're going through. And at the same time, you talk about how psychological, or the invisible wounds of war or of life, can be harder to carry than the physical. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I love that one. If I always have the chance to talk about the unseen injuries, whatever they may be, spinal cord, gunshot wounds, shrapnel, mental health, I think it's important for people like me that get a lot of attention because of the physical wounds to bring light to it. But as far as comparing injuries, it doesn't matter. And the reason why I say it doesn't matter is because it's whatever's relevant to you. If your back hurts, that's relative to you. That's important to you. Your recovery in that aspect is important to you. Whether or not my back hurts or not, or I have, achy joints, it doesn't change the fact that your back hurts. So we got to keep the focus on your wounds, whatever they be, physical or mental, or other, and focus on that. Because saying, oh, Mike's got it way worse than me, it's not that they can't draw inspiration from it. I draw inspiration from all kinds of people, and not all of them are injured. So comparing injuries doesn't do anything. But one of the things, and I was just having this conversation yesterday, whenever I'm home, I try to get the chance to meet up with a few friends I don't get to see all the time. And they're combat veterans. But again, they're the ones that you look at them and you can't see anything wrong. And then people come up to our table and they want to thank me for my service. And that always bothers me, because most of the time, at least half, if not more, of the table is veterans. So I always make it an emphasis to say, hey, look, all these people here served, and bring light to it. So, it'd be easy to brush those people off and say thank you and not bring light to my brothers and sisters at the table. But I think we have an opportunity to support each other, and use that kind of platform to our benefit.
Yeah. You have spent a lot of time in organizations reviewing specifically suicide prevention programming. Both our organizations are around the table with Face the Fight, working together to decrease veteran suicide by 50% by 2030. And you and I have also had talks about the high rates with our youth and with our elderly and first responders across, right? We're seeing these. Let's wrap with your thoughts on what is needed to turn the trend on this.
I mean, I wish I had that answer, because if I had that answer, I think I'd already try to be making a bigger dent into this epidemic. And let me tell you, it's an epidemic. Again, you kind of mentioned, the rise in suicide rates, but if you look at every demographic right now, it's up. and it's higher in military and first responders and children. So that tells me it's also a social epidemic. If you talk to psychologists, if you know somebody who has committed suicide, you're now at a higher rate of committing suicide rate because of it. And I don't know too many veterans that don't know somebody who hasn't taken their own life. Unfortunately, I know more than I can't even put a number on it anymore.
Yeah, so I think, I think therein lies the answers, even though we don't have many, with it being a social epidemic. As you pointed out, I think the answers lie in that social connection and health, and we'll continue to collaborate and find those answers together.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.